Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Tolkien Road, episode 364. This is the final episode in our series on the fall of Númenor, as we consider the major events of the centuries between the Second Age and the Lord of the Rings by exploring Appendix A, a brief chronicle of the Third Age of Middle-earth. Before we get started, I'd like to give a double-up air five to our amazing fellowship. Stick 'em up, fellowship. 3, 2, 1. Whoopsht. Very nice. Special thanks to this episode's executive producers, John R., Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien, SaberSystems, Melkor27, and KG. Also, a shout out to those celebrating their fellowship anniversary in February of 2024, Shane Wise, Sean S., Doc G., Andrew M., Robert H., Sarah W., John R., Sarah M., John Rice, Ish of the Hammer, David Bigwood, Kat L., Aja V., and Eric B. Thank you all so much for sticking with us over the years. Join the Fellowship of the Road by visiting patreon.com/TolkienRoad. When you join the Fellowship of the Road, it helps us to keep on evering on and lends you some cool perks along the way. Learn more at patreon.com/TolkienRoad. If you're watching, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know what's on your mind in the comments below. Finally, attention binge listeners, subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, the platform of your choice. If you are a 5-star fan of the Tolkien Road, you can really help us out by heading over to iTunes or your preferred source for the show and dropping us a rating and review. When you do that, it helps get the word out about the Tolkien Road, which helps us to keep on evering on. All right. Well, with Sauron having been defeated and disembodied at the end of the Second Age, and a time of peace settling in upon the free lands of Middle-earth, how do we arrive at the events of the Lord of the Rings some 3,000 years later? The account we'll be looking at today is taken entirely from Of the Rings of Power and the Third Age and describes the major events that lead up to a long-expected party and the forming of the Fellowship of the Ring. Alright, so when we left off, Elendil, Gil-galad, and Anarion were dead, with Isildur and Elrond having survived. Of course, Isildur set Meneldil, Anarion's heir, upon the throne of Gondor, and began the long journey to Arnor with Sauron's ring. However, Isildur was ambushed and killed at the Gladden Fields, and the ring was lost at the intersection of the Gladden and the Anduin. Just to highlight where that occurred, here on our trusty map of Middle-earth. Zoom in a little bit here for you. All right, so essentially, before I draw, let me see if I can just move this thing around a little bit. Here we go. All right, so of course, Isildur had made a journey up, basically kind of along the line of the Anduin. Okay, so he had been returning this way, and he arrives here at the Gladden Fields, and that's where he and his men are ambushed by orcs, and Isildur tries to escape, and is unfortunately he ends up trying to escape by trying to cross the Anduin here at the intersection of the Gladden and the Anduin, and the ring betrays him, and he is killed by the orcs, and the ring is just lost somewhere in the rivers where the two rivers converge. And it's just that's where it is for a long time, and nobody really understands or knows where to find it for a long time. So a few of Isildur's hosts escape back to Arnor, delivering the news and the shards of Narsil. And if you want to learn more about the whole account, like the details of how this all went down, look at Unfinished Tales. We did a 2-part episode on the disaster of the Gladden Fields, and it kind of goes into details about how it all went down there, and some kind of different aspects of the accounts and why it was so hard for people to figure out later on, like what happened to Isildur and to the ring. Pretty interesting stuff, but we did a couple of episodes on it. I mentioned it in the last episode, which two those were. I don't have them off the top of my head right now, but go back and find them. They should be pretty easy to find. Disaster of the Gladden Fields. So we have Meneldil, the son of Anarion, who is on the throne of Gondor, and now it is going to be Valandil, who is Isildur's only surviving son. In fact, Isildur had other sons who were older than Valandil, but they're all killed at the disaster of the Gladden Fields as well. So Valandil is made the king of Arnor, And Arnor exists as a major power in Eriador for several centuries until the days of Eärendil, Valandir's seventh heir, when it became divided and eventually fell into ruin. The line of Isildur was overseen by Elrond, who was indeed their kinsman through their descent from Elros, Elrond's brother, right? Elros being the original king of Númenor, and the line of Elendil and Isildur and Anarion all descends from Elros. So they're distant kinsmen of Elrond, so that's why Elrond kind of, not only is there kind of the interest in terms of like he wants these allies, to be kept close, but there's the familial sort of reasons, right? That these are indeed Elrond's kinsmen, even if they are mortals and he is immortal. So Gondor endures quite a bit longer. And even flourishes for a long time. And I should say there's a lot more to the history of Arnor. We've actually gone over that too in past episodes when we talked about the various appendices of the Lord of the Rings. It really kind of fascinating in how detailed it actually gets. Probably plenty of stories that could be told about the history of Arnor in and of itself. But the point is that Arnor kind of starts to decay and fall apart from its, sort of Númenorian heritage, much more soon, much sooner than Gondor does. Gondor really has a Númenorian king, right, a descendant of Anarion and Elendil for many, many generations, almost 2,000 years, right? And there's lots of interesting history associated with Gondor in that time period as well. But Gondor maintains this, clear kingdom and Númenorian kingship for 2,000 years before that line dies out. There was, so why was there this difference? This is an interesting question to me. Why was there this difference in longevity between Arnor and Gondor? Well, Tolkien, I don't think ever really says clearly, but my speculation is that Arnor, because it kind of exists in this area that's between Rivendell and Lindon, and it's far away from Mordor, and like the original stronghold of Sauron, it's required to be less vigilant, and maybe it becomes more decadent more quickly because of that, right? There's more opportunity for them to kind of fall into the ways of their Númenorian forefathers more quickly than there is for Gondor, because Gondor exists right on the frontier of Mordor, and it's really Gondor's job to kind of keep the watch over the land of Mordor to ensure that evil doesn't return to it. So, that vigilance, that requirement of vigilance, I think, makes for, just a stronger people, right? There's a saying that I've seen a few times recently. I'm going to butcher it, but it's something along the lines of hard times make strong men make easy times make weak men make hard times, right? It's kind of like this cycle, right? You can think of like Gondor as like the ultimate like place where it's always kind of hard times because they're so close to Mordor, so they've got to be much more vigilant. Just the nature of their people, is to be more vigilant, to be less decadent, whereas the people of Arnor can get all caught up in the things that powerful people do when they don't have anything better to do. So that's my theory as to why Arnor declines so much more quickly than Gondor does. And indeed, Gondor might have maintained its line of kings if there hadn't been this resurgence of Mordor beginning in the mid-1600s when a great plague comes on Gondor. And Gondor is greatly diminished, so much so that the people, the watchmen of Gondor, really they have to pull back from Minas Ithil, from the various fortresses that are apparently on the borders of the land of Mordor, and kind of make sure that nothing is, no one's getting like back to funny business in Mordor. And so Minas Ithil is abandoned, and the servants of Sauron, especially the Ringwraiths, begin to return to Mordor in this time. And then around Third Age 2000, Minas Ithil becomes Minas Morgul, is overtaken by the forces of Sauron, and Osgiliath is all but abandoned as well. So Minas Anor at that time becomes Minas Tirith, which we of course know it as in the Lord of the Rings, and it becomes the capital of Gondor. Osgiliath falls into ruin. Minas Ithil is really just in the hands of of the forces of Mordor now, and is now Minas Morgul. And the line of the kings of Gondor ends in 2050 with the death of Eärendil at the hands of the Nazgul. So I find it pretty interesting that the two last kind of Númenorian kings of Arnor and Gondor, both of them, even though they existed at very different times, they're both named Eärendil, it appears, unless I wrote that down wrong. But yeah, they're both named Eärendil. I wonder here. Let's see. Just occurs to me. Let's look and see what the name Eärendil means. Some of you all may just know off the top of your heads. Wait, is it? Oh, wait, it's Eärnur is the last king of Gondor. Sorry, all right, I had that wrong. I mean, come on, it's close. Eärendil, Eärnur. Lots of these names have some variation of that. Let's see what Eärnur means. Eärnur is Quenya, being a shortened form of Eärendil. There you go. So it is the same name. It's just a shortened form of Eärendil. Let's see here. All right. So what does Eärendil mean? Eärendil is a Quenya name. It means professional mariner. So I'm not really sure either of these guys were mariners. I think maybe Gondor had a little bit of, that retained a little bit of that mariner nature, maybe in their culture, but Eärendil was a name, an important name in the history of Númenor itself. There were a couple of figures named Eärendil in the history of Númenor, but nevertheless, kind of a digression. Arnor and Gondor, their last kings, share very similar names. In fact, it might actually be written as Eärendil in the text I was using for for the last king of Gondor. I'm not sure, but apparently it's just a shortened form of it either way. Okay. So yeah, the line of kings of Gondor ends in 2050. That's of course why in Lord of the Rings there is no king of Gondor. There's only the steward of Gondor, right, Denethor, and then his sons Boromir and Faramir. It's the stewards of Gondor that are ruling it from here until Lord of the Rings. So that's a little bit about Arnor and Gondor in the Third Age. Now, what about the elves? So of the elves, the three main kingdoms of the Noldor are Imladris, Lindon, and Lorien, though Lindon has become greatly diminished with the losses endured during the last alliance, and especially of Gil-galad, who was the High King of the Noldor. The three rings bring great mirth and the power of preservation, though it is known that their power cannot last forever, and the age of men is soon to dawn. So wherever in these three places, right, Lindon, Imladris, Rivendell, and Lorien, they have this, like, the three rings reside. One of the three rings is there with one of its keepers, and so these locations are kind of like little havens of bliss, like little tiny islands of bliss in what is really kind of a sort of a wilderness, kind of dangerous places out there. Now, maybe not as dangerous as it was when Sauron was really powerful, but these places are really places of joy, of bliss, as much bliss as maybe can be had in this world, aside from the Blessed Realm. So the three rings are still around, and they still have that power of preservation, which they were really created for, right? They were created to bring that power to whoever had them. And speaking of elves, we of course have other elves, not just the Noldor and the Sindar, but also the Sylvan elves, right? And so in the last episode, we spoke a little bit about Orophair, who was the king of Greenwood the Great, and then he dies in battle, goes a little Leroy Jenkins at the last alliance of men and elves, the Battle of Dagorlad, and dies there. But his son Thranduil is the new king and rules Greenwood the Great for a long time. He is a figure in The Hobbit, of course, and then Thranduil being the father of Legolas as well. Greenwood the Great is sounds like a pretty nice place until the shadow begins to creep in, and a stronghold is established in the south of Greenwood, aka Mirkwood, at Dol Guldur. At some point in the Third Age, the Astari arrive mysteriously from over the seas, with Curufin, aka Saruman, and Mithrandir, aka Gandalf, playing the most important roles. We also have Radagast and the two blue wizards, maybe even some other wizards, but you know, the two that are most of concern to us are Saruman and Gandalf. In 2463, the same year that Sméagol obtained Sauron's ring, a White Council is held consisting of Saruman, Gandalf, Elrond, Galadriel, Círdan, and other lords of the Eldar. While Gandalf urges the White Council to a preemptive strike against Dol Guldur, they are delayed by the persuasions of Saruman, who has his own ulterior motives. A few more hundred years pass. Lots of things happen. The rise of Rohan, the various intrigues of the dwarves, lots of interesting things going on. Lots of just stories that could be whole books and tales themselves. There's just so much ripe stuff, just that somebody could turn into a story and all these things. So we're skipping over a whole lot, but the battle, what we're trying to do really is bridge ourselves to the Lord of the Rings. And then in 2941, the Battle of Guldur happens. So Gandalf persuades the White Council to attack Dol Guldur, and that's the year that Bilbo obtains the One Ring. So interesting sort of pattern here, right? We have the first White Council held in the year of that Gollum obtains the ring, right? And then we have this White Council. We have the Battle of Dol Guldur, spurred on by the White Council, which happens in 2941, which is the year that Bilbo gets his hand on the ring, right? So just kind of interesting, synchronicity, if you will. Though Dol Guldur is defeated by the forces of the White Council, Sauron escapes to Mordor and reestablishes his reign of terror there. And Gandalf had for some time kept watch over the little folk of Eriador, the Periana, thinking to himself, "Many are the strange chances of the world, and help oft shall come from the hands of the weak when the wise falter." So he becomes aware that Bilbo obtained the One Ring, but also knows that Sauron's servants are searching for it. And this is how we come to the formation of the Fellowship, and see thus how the great tragedy of the downfall of Númenor itself leads into the story of Bilbo, Frodo, Aragorn, Gandalf, Sam, and the rest of the Fellowship. In all of this, a key theme is the weakness of the powerful in the face of evil as an existential reality. So, kind of a quick gloss over the the whole history of the Third Age, over 3,000 years. And there's much more that could be said about that period of time. We've talked a lot about it in past episodes. If you want to learn more about the different, the interstitial history of the Third Age, more about Arnor, Gondor, all of the intrigues they were involved in, you can find it in the archives of this podcast, right? We've gone through a lot of it, right? But as I said, in all of this, a key theme is the weakness of the powerful in the face of evil as an existential reality. Númenor is set up as this powerful kingdom, but it falls to evil, right? It's powerful in a worldly sense, but it falls to the existential reality of evil. While the powerful are often able to temporarily defeat and restrain evil, somehow the shadow returns time and again, often taking down the powerful with it. Can evil ever be defeated with any finality? Many of us would probably say no. Somehow the shadow always rears its ugly head. But I'm not so sure Tolkien would agree with that, and in fact, I believe that one of the key themes of The Lord of the Rings is that spiritual warfare is the ultimate warfare. While strength of arms can indeed restrain evil for a time, it is only spiritual strength, perhaps even a spiritual strength that surpasses humanity, that is capable of delivering evil to its final doom. On that note, and as we conclude this series on the fall of Númenor, I'm excited to invite you to join us as we embark on our next great adventure, our return to The Lord of the Rings. Join us next time as Greta and I begin a new and unexpectedly long journey through Tolkien's masterpiece. All right. Hey, don't forget to stop by TrueMythsPress.com for great merch like super styling and comfy Tolkien Road t-shirts, True Trees camper mugs, and signed copies of my books. Once again, that's TrueMythsPress.com. Thanks for supporting our work with your purchase. And thank you to our amazing patrons, especially the following: John R., Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien, SaberSystems, Melkor27, KG, Emilio P, Jonathan D, Richard K, Robert H, Paul D, Julia, Werty, JoeBagelMan, Matt R, John W, Eugene D, Alaskan Moose 31, Chris B, Daniel S, Cory C, Carolyn S, Emiel K, Seb M, Brian O II, Ms. Anonymous, Andrew T, Redhawk, Shannon S, Brian O I, Zeke F, James L, Chris L, Aja V, Ish of the Hammer, Teresa C, David of Pints with Jack, and Eric B. All right, thank you so much to our amazing fellowship, and thanks to everybody for watching and or listening. We will talk at you next time. Bye-bye.